Just wanted to welcome everybody to our lecture. Again, we do this once a month. And the Alaska Center for Energy and Power is a group at the university that does energy research. And it's our goal to make sure that the key decision makers in Alaska have the information they need to make smart choices for energy. And that's everywhere from legislatures to community leaders and tribal leaders to individual folks like you. Now, a lot of our research is based on community or an industry scale power generation. So we've worked with some of our partners on some of the homeowner type issues like we're going to be talking about tonight. So we're really looking forward to the panel that we have assembled. Just want to say thanks to the Blue Loon for hosting us. We've been doing this for a few months now, and feedback has been positive. So if you have any feedback about the location or about topics you'd like to hear, just let us know up at the table, and we're happy to take that on. The next lecture will be the third Tuesday of every month is when we try to do these. And so the next lecture is going to be November 16th. And it's a little bit of a different format. We're going to have Mark Foster, who's an energy economist here. And he's going to be looking at some of the larger scale projects for the rail belt from an economist's view. So taking a look at the numbers of some of those larger scale projects. So I think it will be really interesting. If you are unable to attend or know folks that are far away and can't attend, we do offer web streaming of this live. And then we also have it available just a few weeks afterwards on iTunes or as a downloadable podcast or something. Or you can just also download the presentations from our website. So we do have notepads and pens in the back that you're welcome to use today, and then go home and it has our website right there on the logo or on the pen, so you can take a look at that. So this time, because this is such a topic that people have a lot of questions, we're doing a little bit shorter presentations from each of our panelists, and then make sure we leave plenty of time for questions for everybody here. So our panel of experts include folks from the Alaska Energy Authority, the Alaska Housing Finance Corporation, Interior Weatherization, and Cold Climate Housing Research Center. So what we're going to do is brief questions, so hold your questions till the end, and then we'll have the panel come up, sit down, and we'll raise the house lights and let you guys have a good conversation. All right, so first we're going to bring up Katie Conway from the Alaska Energy Authority.
Good evening. Can everyone hear me okay? All right. Well, as Julie said, I'm from the Alaska Energy Authority, and I don't want to assume everybody knows what that is. We're a branch of state government in the Department of Commerce. And one of our missions is to reduce the cost of energy in Alaska. So we've historically worked a lot in rural energy, and with the start of the Renewable Energy Fund a few years ago and other renewable energy interests, we've expanded. I work on energy efficiency, outreach, and public education. So just a couple of things I'm going to go over. My presentation is very short. I promise I'm going to try not to bore you. I want to talk briefly about the new state energy efficiency goal, some of the energy efficiency and conservation programs and developments at AEA, and a new collaborative outreach initiative that we're actually right in the middle of right now. So as you probably are aware, this past spring, our legislature passed a new goal in House Bill 306 to improve the state of energy efficiency in Alaska by 15% in the next 10 years. The governor signed this into law, and this has been supported by a document you also might be familiar with called the Energy Pathway. This is something that our executive director, Steve Hagenson, and a whole slew of people put together, and if you're interested in the pathway, you can find it on the AEA website. And now it's been endorsed, the goal has been endorsed by organizations all around the state through a group called the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Working Group. And we all believe that it is possible to make this improvement, to reach this 15% goal. And if anything, that might be an understatement, that we could actually do better than that. The first programs, or the first set of programs, I should say, I'll mention are the Small City Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grants. and the Village Energy Efficiency Program. These are sister programs. They're very, very similar, but they come from different sources of money, so they are separate. The EECBG program serves about 97 communities, 97 small cities in Alaska, and the VEEP program has 21 villages in the state. I think the combination is about $8 million. They're both stimulus-funded programs, and the intention is to weatherize and retrofit public buildings in these communities to help lower the cost of energy. Here's a quick map for you of the different communities. You can see that there is a lot of money on the ground around Alaska for energy efficiency right now. And before I move on to some of the other programs, I'll also mention one that I forgot to put a slide in for this. You might have heard of the Whole Village Retrofit program. That was a collaborative effort by a long list of organizations, including AEA. I don't want to go into that now. The list is too long, and I don't know if I'd remember everybody. But that was a pilot project. The Whole Village Retrofit was done in the community of Nightmute. It was very successful, and we'll be doing 3 more communities next year. Emonic, Alukanuk, and Fort Yukon. And I don't think we have a lot of information about those yet because the decision about where to do the next round has just been made recently. So we'll be starting a commercial energy audit program. I know this session is about home weatherization and how you can prepare your home for the winter, but this is kind of big news. Because a lot of homeowners also are business owners. And it's coming soon, hopefully by the end of the year, we'll be starting a pilot project at AEA for probably about 100 businesses. Alaskan-owned businesses will be able to be funded under this, and it will, it'll pay for the cost of an energy audit. Hopefully that audit would then be used to find out what kinds of improvements you need to make and then make them. And when we're ready to launch this, the application will be on our website. So if that's something you're interested in, keep your eyes on our website. And I'm guessing it'll probably be pretty close to the end of the year that it actually comes out. One of the things that we'll be looking for is getting the data back. So we can use that as another part of a collaborative effort to gather data about energy use in the state and track that. Again, looking toward this 15% goal. Another program that's pretty interesting at AEA is a pilot project for industrial energy efficiency. It's just within the seafood processing plant. So it's a pretty small niche, but it has proven to be successful. I think there have been 2 seafood processing plants audited so far, both in Cordova, and the community is proud of what's been done, and we're very optimistic that this could turn into something bigger than that eventually. But it's just nice that we have something in the industrial sector. Again, the workplace energy stuff doesn't really fit in with the home weatherization, but if you care about energy efficiency in your home, then maybe you'd like to do something in your workplace. This is something that we've done at AEA. We have a very, very inefficient building in Anchorage, and uh-oh. Marcus, I don't know what I did. Okay, we're back on track. We implemented an energy, building-wide energy policy right after the fiscal year, and it's really straightforward. A bunch of the no-brainer measures you'd expect people to take anyway, but most of us are lazy and just don't do. Things like turning off our computers or putting them on power strips that we can flip off at the end of the night, putting our copy machines on timers. Just the policy results, and we have a map of this, showed a really simple payback and some pretty significant annual savings. If you look at the different measures taken over the course of the summer and now going into fall, like power strips turned off at night, computers turned off, putting our coffee makers on timers, that was a surprising one. Most of those industrial coffee makers are on 24/7. And some of the other refrigerators, making sure we don't have completely archaic refrigerators. We have the newest ones possible. And we're saving a lot of money, and this is something that anybody can do in your business. I know that businesses care about the bottom line. If you're interested in this, you can find it on our website, and it would be a very simple template to use in your workplace if you're interested. So one more piece. This is all new things that will be happening soon. Research and data collection, and this is actually part of a grant that AEA wrote on behalf of this statewide stakeholders group earlier in the summer, and just recently found out we had received. It'll fund a lot of what I would call critical information gaps, things like a statewide end-use data study. If we want to work toward a 15% goal, it'd be great to know exactly where we are now, and then we can measure that progress as we move forward. It will fund a statewide needs assessment for improving energy efficiency, and then compare that to a study of best practices for energy efficiency, education, and outreach outside Alaska, so we can have a more targeted, more effective strategy for reaching out to the public, which I think is great. And then revisiting a policy and program recommendations report done 2 years ago that's been used a lot, particularly by our legislature. Most of the legislation passed this spring in Senate Bill 220 and House Bill 306 came from recommendations initially in the first version of this report, so now it's time to do another one. And finally, my favorite part, the education and outreach campaign at AEA, including a new website. And this is where it might actually tie in with what you came here tonight to hear about. This Energy Efficiency and Conservation Working Group is a large and growing body of over 30 organizations around the state, including ACEP, AHFC, CCHRC, and a long list of acronyms I won't bore you with now. We came together to coordinate our efforts and agreed that this 15% goal is achievable, and we can get there, and it will work better for all of us if we do it together. One of our first projects is working on a comprehensive one-stop shop virtual energy center, which is this website, akenergyefficiency.org. It's a work in progress. We'd love your feedback on it. If you go to the site and have anything to say, please let us know. We'd like to make it a resource that works for all of you. And finally, this brings us to one of the reasons we might be here tonight, and that's because October is Energy Awareness Month. Here's a quick look at our website. And again, if you haven't been here before, or you have and you haven't really given it much thought, I ask that you go to it when you have a chance and send us an email. Let me know what you think needs to be added, or if you have any kind of positive or even negative feedback. We really want this to be a place that Alaskans can use as a first point of contact into the universe of energy efficiency in Alaska. It's a heavily link-based site, so odds are if you start here, you'll end up somewhere else, but if you keep returning here, you'll never run out of places to go to find what you need. For Energy Awareness Month, even though, as some of us were pointing out before we started here, it's getting toward the end of October, if you're interested at all in some of in a poster for your workplace, your kid's school, tip sheets that you can use or pass on to a friend or neighbor or coworker, there's a bunch by the door. Please feel free to take as many as you like on the way out. And this is from the proclamation. The governor didn't make a big deal about this, but he did indeed sign a proclamation making October 2010 Alaska Energy Efficiency Awareness Month. And that's it. If you have any questions about what we do with energy efficiency at AEA, here's contact information not just for me, but also for my coworker and my boss. And that's it.
Thank you very much, Katie. Now we're going to bring up Scott Waterman with Alaska Housing Finance Corporation.
Thanks, all. We've been working the last couple of years rather busily on some weatherization, the home energy rebate program. I'll give you just a quick update on some of that. The weatherization program got funded a couple of years ago at $200 million. and then $100 million for rebates. There was an additional $60 million that were tied in September of that year in 2008. And to date, most of that money has been encumbered. It's not all been spent. There's still some money left, but most of that million has been encumbered. So a little bit of a quick run through. The weatherization program is a low-income program that has provided grants for low-income people in Alaska to help them weatherize their homes. In previous program years before this started, it averaged about 600 homes per year. In FY 2009, there was 1,864, projected 3,800 homes this year, and 7,500 next year. We've reached over 100 communities in the last 2 years already, where in previous years we used to do about probably about 40 communities. So that's increased pretty dramatically. On the rebate side, all of the funds have been fully encumbered, but as you may be aware, the rebate program, you get an as-is energy rating, you get you do the work from the list of improvements that's been offered, and then you get your post-energy rating, and you have 18 months to do the work and get your post rating, get your paperwork turned in to get the rebate. That money has been fully encumbered, but we're getting about 65% of the people that got an as-is rating are actually following through and getting a post rating. So that 35% that have not followed through, that money is returning to the pot and kind of rolling over. And we're still releasing about 400 names per month to get the energy efficiency, home energy rebate as-is rating done. On the rating side, there's so far been just under 9,000 rebates paid, averaging just over $6,200 a month, and as I said, about a 63% participation rate. New 5-star plus homes, there's been 834 5-star plus homes built in the last 2 years. The raters have increased fairly dramatically. The wait list, at one point we were a little bit short on raters, and in late 2008, early 2009, there was quite a long wait list of over 10,000 people. That dropped off to under 1,000 at the end of 2009, and because the money was fully encumbered at that point, it's been slowly climbing ever since and is just under 4,000. There's about 325 people here in Fairbanks that are on the wait list right now. But we've dispatched just under 30,000 as-is ratings in the last 2 years, which is fairly impressive given that the previous 12 years we had about 35,000 energy ratings done statewide in the 12 years previous to 2008. So on average, homeowners have been spending about $10,800, getting a $6,200 rebate, and for about a $4,600 investment out of their own pocket. Energy savings have been averaging about $1,568 a year, over 12,000 pounds of CO2 reduced per home. Average improvement has been 3 steps, and moving fairly well along. This is just a quick snapshot of the average savings by fuel type. You can see the different savings there, and that's on just under 7,000 homes. We have a second mortgage for energy efficiency. It's a 15-year mortgage. We've had 84 of those loans that have been taken out and paid off already, and a total of 27,000 homes have actually been served with some form of work already, including 5-star plus homes. So this is the breakout: 13,000 for weatherization, 14,500 on the rebate program, and so that's a lot more homes that have received service in the last 2 years than we've done in a lot of previous years. Kind of before and after shots of what kind of things have been happening. Before, from 1996 to March 2008, there was 2,300 in a 12-year period. There was 2,300 5-star plus homes. There's been 720 as of June. Previous ratings in 12 years and 29,000 in the last 2 years. Weatherization, previous 12 years was 10,000. The last 2 years, we've done over 5,000 homes. So a lot has been happening fairly quickly, and it has been really moving quite quickly right along. A couple other things that are going on. HSC's designated as the State Energy Office, so we're the recipient of all the energy efficiency funds for Alaska. The Energy Efficiency Conservation Block Grant Program, which Katie mentioned. AEA is managing that part of the project in the Village Energy Efficiency Program. They're also doing some waste heat recovery. We've got money here with CCHRC to do sustainable northern communities, which Ryan will probably touch on, building energy efficiency standards, improvements to ACWARM and the database that it goes behind ACWARM, which is the software that the weatherization program and the home energy rebate program use. And then we're just embarking with the retrofit for public facilities. We've got a revolving loan fund that's been established, and we're about to launch that. And we have a couple $150 million to start retrofitting public buildings across the state. So with that, I'll make time for questions after the rest of the panelists are done. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Scott. Okay, third speaker, we're going to hear from Interior Weatherization.
All right, so my name is Todd Van Osdal. I'm with Interior Weatherization. I'm the technical manager over there at our office. Basically, I'm in charge of all aspects of assessments and inspections for our company. I also go out and do the assessments myself, determine what sorts of improvement options are available for the houses and what sorts of measures can be done. So I'll start off by giving a little bit of background about what the weatherization program is, and then kind of move into how people qualify, and then talk a little bit about some of the work that we do and some things like that. So the Interior Weatherization was incorporated as a nonprofit in 1985. So we've been in the interior area for quite a while. And we've been around town. We've been a lot more visible lately, as Scott was mentioning, with the increased amount of work that we're doing. Just a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, we were doing about 200 homes a year. This year, we're slated to do just about 500 homes. So we've really expanded a lot in the last couple of years, and that's been in part to a lot of more attention and investment in energy efficiency and conservation. We receive most of our funding at this point through Alaska Housing Finance Corporation and through the state of Alaska, through the legislature. But we also do receive some grants from the U.S. Department of Energy and the federal government as well. Basically, how you qualify for the weatherization program is based on your income. So if you earn 100% of median income for the Fairbanks area or the Denali Borough or Nenana or Delta, if you earn 100% of median income or less, then you would qualify for our program. Within that qualification, there's several tiers of how you're prioritized on a certain wait list. So you sign up for the program, you have your income verified that you qualify, and then you're placed on a wait list that determines when we actually get to the assessment and do the work on the house. And the prioritization typically goes in favor of people who are of lower income, so below 200% of poverty, but also people who are elderly or have disabled occupants in the home or small children. So, but as you can see on this table, they've raised the income guidelines in recent years. So I don't really like to call it so much of a low-income weatherization program, but it's more low to moderate income. So even with a family of 4, you can have a fairly substantial income and still qualify for the program. If you've received any sort of assistance through heating assistance, food stamps, senior benefits, any of these programs mentioned up here, you automatically qualify for the program. So a lot of times our company will get referrals through heating assistance, through food stamps, and those kinds of things, and refer their clients to us, and that's how we get a good portion of our clients. I'll talk a little bit about kind of what weatherization is. Just a couple of years ago, nobody really knew what weatherization was until Obama said weatherization is sexy, and everybody kind of wondered what that meant. And there's a lot of, when people think weatherization, sometimes people ask me what the weather's gonna be like tomorrow. That's not typically what we do. Or a lot of times weatherization is closely connected to primarily weather stripping, doors and windows, things like that. But really weatherization is a lot more than that. This definition here is straight out of our operations manual. It says weatherization is the science of making a dwelling more energy efficient by making improvements that may result in a return on investment in the form of reduced energy consumption, reduced energy costs, and or increased comfort and durability. So the first part of that obviously places emphasis on energy efficiency and conservation and looking for cost-effective measures. They're going to involve some sort of return on investment. So you're trying to get some sort of payback for your investment, a bigger bang for the buck. And that all seems pretty straightforward until you get to the latter part of the definition, and you get these last 2 little words that say comfort and durability. And those 2 words are really important in kind of separating weatherization from, just straight building energy efficiency or things like that. And I'll get into kind of why that complicates things, why comfort and durability kind of complicate what we do in a little bit. Well, I guess I'll do it now. The main reason why comfort and durability make our jobs a little more complicated is because weatherization looks at the whole house as a system. We don't just look at the shell, the doors and the windows, the insulation, your attic or your foundation. We don't just look at changing the behavior of the occupants. We don't just look at the mechanical systems, the heating systems, and the ventilation. We look at it as a system that should operate as a whole. And the difference between a building and a house is a structure that performs as a livable dwelling. So it's kind of like a triangle. If you have a triangle is a very strong structure when you have all the points equal. And if you have any one of those points lacking, the structure collapses. So if you have a building envelope that is very tight and well insulated, you can have a very efficient building. But if it's not ventilated properly, you can run into durability issues with moisture and rot. If you have a building with no occupants, a great heating system, and a great building shell, you can keep the thermostat at 50 degrees and it'd be a very efficient, low-cost building, but it's not going to do very well in terms of comfort. Or you can have a building that is very well insulated, has very energy conscious clients, but the mechanical systems don't work quite well. So in order to get the whole system to work, weatherization focuses on all 3 of these fronts. The primary goal of the weatherization program, again, is energy conservation. And we do that in some really key areas where we typically find low-hanging fruit. Most of the homes that we work on in the Fairbanks area are older homes, usually built prior to 1985. Most of the homes that we deal with are built somewhere between 1970, 1965, and 1985 during the pipeline booms. So you tend to see a lot of the same kind of building techniques and things. But typically the main areas where we see low-hanging fruit and good potential for energy savings are houses that have heating systems that are older and possibly out of date. Looking at tune-ups, if that's available, looking at proper distribution, especially with forced air furnaces, and looking at heating system replacements and upgrades. And that's more focused on the energy inside of things. So we're looking at improving the efficiency of our inputs. The rest of weatherization deals more with the efficiency of our energy outside and the energy going out of our building shell. So we deal more with insulation in areas where we can affect a large square footage with a large amount of R value at the same time for the lowest cost. And the areas where we typically find that we can add the most R value for the cheapest cost over a large square footage is typically our foundations and our attics. So we focus a lot on those areas. We also deal a lot with air leakage. We run blower door tests to assess the houses for air leakage and look for savings in that as well. So there's some pretty typical areas where we find a lot of low-hanging fruit. And one thing that I should mention is the big energy savings that we tend to find in these older homes isn't isolated to these older homes. We're still seeing it in homes that were built as early as 5 years ago or less. So one thing that is helpful about these lectures is that people can get educated in making homes that perform better, that are more efficient, are healthier, and more durable. So it's an ongoing process. It's not a problem that we've particularly solved, even with new construction. And so after you've identified certain kinds of cost-effective improvements and identified a certain amount of savings, the next thing is how do you address those areas? How do you install the improvements in a way that actually performs and gets you the savings that you're hoping to expect? And for that reason, I want to go over this little diagram here. One thing that's really interesting is this is an example of, let's say, an attic that's 1,000 square feet, so 25 by 40 feet. And if I were to go into that attic and insulate it, and let's say I just insulated half of the attic, I insulated the center with R100, that's over 2 feet of cellulose insulation. And let's say I didn't insulate the outside 6 feet on either side, and I left it just bare, just sheetrock, an R value of about 1 or so. And so I've got an R value of about 100 on half of the attic and an R value of about 2 on the other side of the attic. And the question that I would ask is, what's my overall effective R value in my attic? And conventional wisdom might tell us, well, you have half your attic's insulated, half's not, so we just average it. We add the R values together, divide by 2, should get us an average R value of about 50. But heat loss doesn't really work that way in our houses. Heat loss is dynamic, and it wants to follow the path of least resistance. So when you actually do the calculation and you have to convert R values to U values and get a measure of conductance, your R value, your effective R value ends up being about an R2. So when you thought you added about an R100 to half of your attic and say, well, that's good enough, I've got an R50 now, it's really not performing at that level. Now this is a pretty extreme case of a failure of a successful installation, but a failure of performance. But it's not too hard to imagine a case in which, let's say you paid me to go into your attic and insulate it up to R100 and said, sure, no problem, I'll add 26 inches of cellulose in your attic. But let's say I was real lazy, maybe my back was hurting that day, and I insulated right down the middle, but I didn't get quite out at the eaves, so I left a 1-foot strip on either side of the attic and said, well, I couldn't get to that area, so it was a little too tight. So if I left a 1-foot strip on either side of my attic uninsulated, and that's about 80 square feet, or about 8% of the overall square footage of the ceiling uninsulated, how does that affect my overall R value or the performance of the insulation that I installed? And it's actually pretty surprising. You add 100 R100 of cellulose to the attic, that's a lot of cellulose. You think you have R100, but really, you're really only performing at about R11, which is pretty minimal for our climate. So this is just kind of a demonstration of when we identify certain energy measures, that's really only half the battle. The second part of it is installing it properly in a way that actually performs in the way that comes back in real savings and real numbers. That's a lot of kind of what we do as in our office is we not only identify the savings, but we try to achieve those savings in a way that we think is going to actually work. So we do a lot of quality control and training with our own crews to make sure we're getting those energy savings, we're hitting those weak spots, because your insulation is really only as good as your weakest spot in your house. So. And on top of what, energy efficiency and savings, weatherization is really a package. So you can insulate a house and you can air seal it very tight, but if you don't deal with the whole picture, again, the house is a system, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to insulate or air seal a house real tight, but ignore the fact that the range hood can overpower my fireplace and pull fumes back into the house. So we're looking at how certain components affect other parts of the house. So a lot of times with our energy efficiency package, we may have a certain amount of energy savings potential, but we may need to pay back some of that, let's say pay back 5% in ventilation costs to achieve a house that's not only efficient, but healthy and durable as well. So weatherization is kind of unique in our field, is that we're looking at the house as an entire system, whereas your heating contractors are specialists at your heating systems, and they're not going to look at the connection necessarily between your range hood and your boiler. Your insulation contractor is not necessarily going to look at the connection between the ventilation and the insulation that they do. So weatherization really takes a kind of a whole house approach to that, which I think is pretty important in getting these houses to work. So that's basically kind of what I've got. I'll be up here answering other more detailed questions. But if you're interested in applications or applying for the program or seeing whether you qualify, we've got information up here. I'll be hanging around after the lecture, and I'll have pamphlets and handouts that if you're interested or you think somebody you know might be interested, I'll have those available. So thanks.
Thank you, Todd. And our final speaker is going to be Ryan Colgan from Cold Climate Housing Research Center. Bring us home, Ryan. All right.
How's everyone doing? Good? I see some nodding, some verbal answers. That's good. My name is Ryan Colgan. I'm the Chief Program Officer at the Cold Climate Housing Research Center, and because I'm going last, I feel like I don't have anything left to talk about. They covered a lot of what's going on in the state, some of the programs that are available, the concept that the house is a system, and that when we look at changing one aspect of the house, we really need to consider the impact on others. And that's part of what we do at the Cold Climate Housing Research Center, is perform research that's unique to our climate. Of course, our climate creates a great test bed for research, because of, especially in building science research, but it also drives the need for that research, because if we don't pay attention to our climate, understand its impacts on the products that we use and the way we use those products, and overall systems and strategies for shelter, we can find failures. Failures in too little insulation, too little air tightness that drives up our energy cost. We can find it in terms of being too airtight with inadequate ventilation that traps moisture, can lead to unhealthy air quality, can lead to mold issues, so on and so forth. So we live in a very unique place, and that means that we need a unique understanding of how to build, and that means really that in a lot of times that we have to perform unique research. Other people aren't doing that research for us. So as we look at the topic of how do we save energy going into the winter, I'd say that really maybe we're motivated by two things. One is when we think saving energy, we think saving money, right? And even some of us think when we save energy, we're also saving the environment and maybe increasing our sustainability. We're less dependent on others at that point. for our livelihood, for the way that we live, for the, what it takes to live in a place like Alaska. So when we look at Fairbanks, we see that about 35 to 40% of all the energy we use in Fairbanks for everything, including transportation, electricity, heating, across all the sectors, 35 to 40% of that energy is used in the home. So quite a bit of the energy that we consume in our community is consumed in the home, and that not only hits you as individuals, right? You've all paid bills, I'm sure, and don't like writing those checks, just like I don't. But when you add it all up as a community, that puts us somewhere in the neighborhood of $150 million a year. That ultimately, some of that, most of it, actually finds its way out of our community in the form of paying energy, and so that has an impact on our economy, and it doesn't have to. So when we talk about saving money, on the individual scale, our energy cost is basically our price times our use, right? And we don't really have a lot of control over price. We can fuel switch, maybe, try and go away from heating oil and burn wood. We can choose fuels that allow us to participate in the marketplace, so we have some influence over price, but we don't really have an influence over the price that we pay for energy. Those are market forces beyond our control as individuals. In some cases, they're controlled by regulation, and certainly we could invite a conversation to control prices through the government, but that I will leave to you guys to decide if you want to do that. We do have absolute control over use, and in fact, nobody else has control over our use. That's a decision that we all make, whether we make it and where we keep our thermostat, or how we retrofit our house, or even what house we choose to buy. What do we demand of new construction? What do we demand of builders when we look for houses? So use is the individual's responsibility. So how do we go down the path of saving energy, saving money, saving the environment, whatever your motivation is, when it's up to us? And I think maybe that's why we're here today, is to learn what we can do. And so to that end, I'd say, well, it starts with education. I see a lot of familiar faces in the room, and heck, there's people out there who know more than I do about this. So perhaps these next few comments aren't tailored for you, but I hope you find them interesting all the same. You can educate yourself through books like the ACEP Home Energy Savings Guide. This book is organized in a really easy to understand fashion. It describes what a person can do today, what a person can do this week, what a person can do this month, what a person can do this year in terms of projects to save energy. And it even goes so far in some cases to provide a brief explanation of how to go about those types of retrofits. At CCHRC, we've condensed this book down to this as a place to start, really as an entry-level conversation about how to save energy. And what you'll see in here are tips for instance, what a person can do today: turn down your water heater to 120 degrees Fahrenheit, use energy-saving settings on your appliances to the extent that you have those settings, certainly switching out light bulbs. If you haven't done that already, that just makes an infinite amount of sense. Paybacks can be, in some cases, within a month. And service your equipment like boilers, et cetera. So, and the list goes on. So check that out. By the way, this book and others like it are available in our library. Feel free to stop by CCHRC anytime and immerse yourself in the literature that we have. We also, as I mentioned, we perform research that's relevant to issues of the day. For instance, this is a snapshot of a project that we have going right now that looks at the effect of adding exterior insulation to a house. On the one hand, when you have your, a typical wall, 2x4, 2x6, vapor barrier on the inside, a lot of times those vapor barriers are imperfect. Moisture finds its way into the wall. It's cold in the wall. The moisture, reaches dew point and accumulates on a hard surface. Think wood studs or, any other hard surface in there. But in the summertime, it has an opportunity to dry to the outside. When you add exterior insulation, you've potentially created a double vapor barrier. So that moisture still finds its way into the wall, depending on how much insulation you've added to the outside. Moisture accumulates, it can leave, but in the summertime, it is rendered trapped if you use rigid foam on the outside. So how do you get around that? This project is designed to find out how much insulation do you need to add to the outside to move that dew point to the outside of the wall. And we could be somewhat cavalier and say, gosh, 6 to 10 inches of outside insulation on an existing wall in Fairbanks, Alaska will pretty much eliminate that problem. A lot of people, though, say, I don't want to spend that kind of money. What's the bare minimum I can get away with? And so I put this publication on the back table. Make sure to check it out. It walks through some of the circumstances of different amounts of insulation on the outside, ratios to what's on the inside, in both walls with well intact vapor barriers and poor vapor barriers. So I really recommend checking this out. And again, if you're going to make your house tighter, make sure you pay attention to ventilation. You just imagine that you screw the lid on the jar, maybe really warm, but you're going to need to bring air in somehow. And the same is true when you consider making your house more airtight. And then here's a whole variety of other publications, short publications, I'd call them entry-level publications that are available on our website, having to do with everything from energy-saving tips under $100, how to reduce your electric bill, a brief discussion on phantom load, and the fact that appliances you have plugged in right now, even when they're not on, are drawing some electricity, and how you can get around spending money on that unnecessarily. Here's publications on energy efficient boilers and how to make choices between boilers and what to do with existing boilers, how to heat water. We've got publications on water usage, right? A lot of people don't make the connection to between energy and water usage, but the more water you use in a shower, for instance, that's more water that you've had to heat. A stat I like to use, although it's for California, in California, just to move, store, and use water in California, it's 30% of their 30% of their electricity, 19% of their natural gas use, and over 88 billion gallons of diesel. So there's definitely a connection in California to how much water they use, although I think the factors that drive that are a little different than here. How to select windows, what to look for, what to ask, how to be knowledgeable so you can pick out a good window. And of course, air quality, vapor drive, and other issues. And this is just a sampling of what we have available on our website and what you can access in terms of education to make decisions about how to reduce your energy use. And I'd certainly echo the comments of Scott, the folks at Interior Weatherization. There are programs out there right now, the rebate program, although it's slow moving because the encumbrance of money is still an option that people should express an interest in. The weatherization program's an option based on income levels. There's a federal tax incentive right now, up to $1,500 for energy improvements. And so once you have the knowledge, you're going to ask, what can you do yourself and what do you need to find help for? And there's not only help in terms of professionals like energy raters and other contractors, but there's some financial assistance out there right now. With that, I'm going to stop talking and let us move to the next portion of our panel, where we all sit up here, I imagine, and field questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ryan. So I'm going to have each of the speakers just grab a chair and head up to the stage. We're going to raise the lights a little bit. And speakers, if you guys could just repeat the question for us so that folks in web streaming land can also hear the questions and the answers, that would be great. And we'll just be taking questions from the audience around here. Ryan, you can pull that microphone down from the podium. And Todd, I'll give you this one as well so that you aren't limited.
This is dangerous. Are you sure you want me doing this? Yeah, we're getting there.
Have you on a tight leash? We've heard to keep you on a tight leash, right?
Let's see, did we reach all?
Oh, we got one.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. We're all set.
What sometimes happens with these panels is the person, whoever is holding the microphone, is the one that answers all the questions.
Here you go, Scott.
Here, we'll just sort of leave this. I can be a microphone holder.
You guys did a lot of speaking about low income and so on and so forth. Are there any programs in place? I have a lot of tenants that maybe I can pass on to my renters that they can apply for?
Renters do qualify for the weatherization program if they fit under the income guidelines. So if you do have rentals, we do work on rentals quite a bit. We were actually doing more rentals this year than I remember doing last year. If you have multi-family buildings, so large apartment complexes or things like that, we will work on those if we get enough of them signed up and qualified for the program. So there's a certain number of units that have to qualify and actually sign up to do, say, a multiplex of 24 units or something like that. But yeah, renters would qualify for the program.
And that's the same address being across country?
Yes. Yes.
What if you already started the project on your house and it's weatherized it on your own? I mean, I feel like I did the qualification. I wasn't aware of this program. I'm doing a lot of my.
So your question is with the weatherization program, if you've already started doing your own improvements?
I started on my own. I wasn't aware of this. And,
Sure. So the question is if you've already started your own improvements on your house, could you still receive assistance through the weatherization program if you still qualified? And oftentimes we do work on houses where people are, doing improvements as they can on the house. And that's something for the assessor when they come back and actually look at the house. The fact that you're doing your own work typically doesn't disqualify you from the program if you still qualify based on income. I should say that we.
Come out though. In other words, a year or something.
The wait list varies. It depends on how you sit on the priority rankings. And so when you sign up and submit your application, they might be able to give you a better idea based on where your priority is as to how long it would take for us to get out there. It could be weeks, it could be years. It's really hard to say. But I should mention that we don't work on new construction. So if you're building a new house and it's not complete, we can't work on a house unless it's been lived in and it's a habitable structure that's been finished for all intents and purposes.
Scott, did you want to add to that from HFC?
I think he's covered it. Thank you.
I think we had a question down here in the audience somewhere, this direction. No?
Well, I was just hoping to repeat her question.
Oh,
Yes.
sorry. Her question had to do with would renters qualify for the weatherization program? The answer was yes.
And I have a follow-up to that. Katie, you mentioned the commercial energy audits, and would that also represent a commercial venture that could qualify for one of those programs, having rentals and also
I'm not sure. I think for the commercial program, it'll probably have to be a registered business. So if you have a business license, I imagine that you would qualify. And I'm not really sure if you rent properties if you have a business license. I don't.
You do have one, so it would qualify, I assume, under that.
And I'm not really sure. I think the intention of the commercial audit program will be to get into the small business sector, since the housing component, although there is still a lot of need to be met, there are a lot of things going on, and there isn't really yet anything for businesses.
When I was looking at it that way, I was looking at something that I could pass on to my tenants.
Yeah, how will you prioritize those small businesses? I think you said there would be 200?
This first batch will just be a pilot project. It's limited funding, and hopefully we'll be able to show enough success that we'll be able to get some more money from the legislature. And as far as I know, the way the program is being written at this point, it'll be first come, first serve. There's probably only enough money to do about 100 businesses.
And is that Fairbanks or is that all Alaska?
That'll be statewide.
If I could add to that a little bit, one of the things that is going on with the revolving loan fund for the public facilities is AHSC is putting some education opportunities out there to get some commercial energy auditors trained. And many times in commercial businesses, the paybacks can be very quick, under 3 years. And the real issue comes not the issue comes in just figuring out what to do and what's going to be the payback. So if you have a good energy audit that actually calculates paybacks, oftentimes your paybacks will be there to do the work in a relatively short period of time.
Hi, I'm Bill Reynolds. Got a little preamble before I ask my actual question. One, kudos to weatherization. I'm in hundreds of homes here, probably thousands in the local area, doing indoor air quality. And the biggest thing I've seen is the improvement in weatherization and what you guys are doing. It's really great. I work closely with Cold Climate. One of the problems I see out in the field is a lot of the energy and the energy upgrade program, it's based on dollar cost return rather than its effectiveness. So a lot of people don't put windows in. It's a really big portion of your energy loss, but it doesn't give you a return on your dollar as much as insulation and some of the other items. And the other thing that doesn't give dollar cost return is ventilation. In some of the homes I'm in, 50% of the homes that I'm in that have had weatherization upgrades have ventilation problems. It's suggested, it's recommended by ASHRAE, by the energy raters. My business partner is an energy rater, so I get the daily upgrades of what they're taught. So I understand, this will probably be directly for Scott, they're trying to lean toward more and more the suggestions now, BPI and ASHRAE, to ventilate by the standards. But it's almost to the point it's too late. But people have tightened their homes up, and they're taking their last little bit of dollar and putting maybe some ventilation in. But I would venture to say, sign a POR 101. POR 101 ventilation standard says you have ventilation standard. It's insurance for that loan for AHSC. They have the ventilation, it's not going to go bad. Is there any program that at some time the AFC money that goes to people to upgrade their homes, that they can ensure the success of the program? It's not being real successful right now. I've got I've got dozens of cases of people with their upgraded homes with ventilation problems, and they said, I tightened my home up. I've got poor air quality. Poor air quality, we're talking moisture.
Let's have Scott answer that question. And if you want to.
Does AHSC have any programs that will mandate ventilation? No. That said, as you referred to, the rebate program was set up with a list of voluntary measures. And the homeowner is given the options, they're given the education, the energy raters are making recommendations, but we are not mandating what measures are going to be done. And that has not been a part of the program, and at this point is not going to be part of the program.
Why?
I think that there's...
This is a matter of health.
I understand the issue. Believe me, I do.
A little bit.
The difficulty comes in mandating what someone does in their home. And to change the program at this point, I don't know that with all the rebates that have already been paid out, to change the program at this point, it's just not going to be feasible.
This awareness was known a year ago.
I grant that, and I know that this has been an issue all along. I personally agree with you. It's not going to happen.
I think we had a comment down here in the middle.
You say HFC doesn't mandate it for the rebate program. HFC does mandate it for the weatherization program. The weatherization program does have to look at ventilation in every house they work on.
Right, so the comment was that although the rebate program doesn't explicitly mandate ventilation for the rebate program, they do mandate it as far as the policies and procedures manual for the weatherization program. With weatherization, at least, you know, a lot of the dollars that we spend go towards, you know, not only energy efficiency, but dealing with health and safety issues, ensuring that we have proper sources of ventilation, and taking all that into account. So.
And I will say that the ventilation issue is the one thing that it does not have to be recommended by a rater. It's automatically included as a reimbursable expense. The only item on the improvement list that doesn't have to be recommended by a rater to be reimbursed, and it is for that reason that's the issue. Right? It's a health issue, and but it's not going to be mandated in the rebate program.
I have a question about kind of visible signs. I know that you show the home with all the icicles on it, and so that kind of is a visible. Is there any sort of visible sign, or from like a health perspective, anything that you can tell that something's going awry in your house?
Well, it depends on what's going awry. I mean, there's all sorts of problems. So when I go in and look at a house, it's kind of like being a general practice physician. So you get a patient that you've never met, and they've got these symptoms. So I've got ice all over my windows, and my doors freeze up. My doors need to be replaced, and things like that. And so you've got to assess, you know, what are the symptoms, what kind of patient we're dealing with, what kind of health are they in, and can we find a solution? So oftentimes if your windows are icing up, and let's say you've got triple pane windows and well insulated doors and they're still icing up, that may be an indication that we have a high level of humidity that may need to be reduced in order to thaw out those areas and reduce the condensation problems. You may end up with dark staining on your ceilings or walls that may indicate a lack of insulation, where insulation's either settled, or maybe there's a thermal bridge between your studs where wood is conducting heat away faster than your insulation is. So it may point you in the direction of certain weak points in the house. I mean, there's a number of different things. You mentioned the photo with the icicles. So ice damming photo's a good example of ice damming. A lot of times ice damming will indicate a source of heat loss in the house, where there's a warm spot warming up the underside of the roof deck, and that'll cause that snow to melt. And when the snow melts and turns to liquid and refreezes at the eaves, it turns into an icicle, and then that accumulates over time and builds an ice dam. So a lot of times that's an indication of heat loss. And actually today is a good time to go around and look for those kinds of heat loss. When you go home tonight, take a look at your roof. We've got a fresh blanket of snow, and it's not that cold out. So at about 25 to 30 degrees, those warm spots, especially coming from air leaks or heat loss in your attic, will show up very apparent in your house. I had a friend of mine who he lives in a duplex, and I helped him insulate his attic, and we added some cellulose up there. And after it first snowed, I called him and said, do you notice a difference? And he said, yeah, I went out and I took a picture of my side of the duplex versus his side, and mine had way more snow, and I could see his shingles already. So even a week after we'd done the work, you know, who knows what his payback is going to be, but you could see a physical difference in how much snow his roof was holding versus his neighbor's. So there's all sorts of little things that you can look at, little symptoms that clue you into something that's happening that shouldn't. I'm not sure if Scott or has any other sorts of
other
things.
indications could be sooting on top of a water heater, soot on top of the chimney from the exhaust from the heating system, the ghosting on the studs where you can actually see kind of where the stud pattern lies. Those are all indications of various problems in a home.
Anybody have any they'd like to share? We have a hand up here.
Can anybody put a dollar value on this? We have 2 or 3 view windows, south facing, 4 foot by 4 foot, fixed pane. If I were to put a 2-inch blue foam plug on the outside, tightly fitting, what would that say? One window.
Well, it's hard to give a dollar value on that because we don't know what your source of heat is. So the more efficient your source of heat, whether it's a boiler or a very efficient wood stove, the cost of your energy going in is going to affect the cost of your energy going out, say through that window. So the more efficient your boiler is, the less cost effective or the less potential dollar savings there is in replacing that window or adding foam to that window. One thing, especially with the south-facing window in the wintertime that you've got to consider is that this time of year and in the springtime, you're going to get a certain amount of solar gain. And you've got to weigh how much that solar gain is worth versus keeping that heat out during the daytime. So you may not want to put that foam on there until Thanksgiving and keep it on until Valentine's Day, and then get more of the solar gain.
Solar gain, and we've got a fuel oil furnace that was just tested at, I think, 84% efficiency. You want to give a shot at a ballpark figure?
Did you say you had triple pane?
No, double pane.
Double pane. Okay. So it's just the area of the window, 16 feet, times the U value, which is probably 0.26, times the delta T between indoors and out. So for each degree of delta T, that'll yield BTUs per degree of delta temperature differential between indoors and out. So if you kind of maybe assume a 70-degree average temperature differential between indoors and out.
That's clear as mud. Everybody following? Everybody got a pencil?
Hey, I'm there.
And he asked the question.
Keep going. Keep going.
All right. So it's 16 times, say 0.26 times 70 is 290 degrees at 70 degrees, or 290 BTUs at 70-degree temperature differential indoors to out. So the R value is just the inverse, or the U value is just the inverse of the R. So if you have R10, it's just 1 divided by 10, or 0.1. So adding you can see what the difference is going to be. Just do that math.
The R value of that double pane would be, what, around 2? 1.8 to 2?
Actually, you want to use U value. It's a U value, not the R value.
Correct.
So the area times the U value times the delta T is the formula to figure that out.
And you and I think the same way, and my wife is thinking about a blue foam on the outside of the house.
Can you explain
The nice thing is
difference
that's-
between R and U down the road? Sorry, go ahead.
I think Scott would probably be best with that answer.
Well, maybe before that, I'll just mention that over the last winter, we conducted research on, I think it was 9 different window retrofits. So assuming, most of the in-situ windows were single or double pane. We looked at, everything from the plastic film, shrink wrap film that you put on the inside, storm windows on the inside, storm windows on the outside, insulating blinds, a plug of, well-fit plug of rigid foam, movable shades on the outside. There was, you can begin to see there were a lot of different configurations that we looked at, and we measured the center glass R value change. The results of that report will probably be out sometime later this year. We've got another report sort of on the, if you think of air traffic control, that's due to land before that on reflective insulation and what exactly you get out of the reflective surface of insulation. So look for those two a little bit later this year. They're not going to cover every single example of combination that's out there, but they'll give you a little bit of an idea of what happens when you retrofit windows in a certain way. And the question about R and U value, I'm going to leave to someone else.
U value and R value are just the inverse of each other. It's just a different way to look at. R value is considered the resistance to heat, but in any calculation that you have to do, you have to use U value.
That's kind of why the example that I showed versus calculating an R value is to find an average R value, which actually doesn't make any sense. You would have to, in that calculation where I'm showing an insulated portion of the attic versus the insulated portion, I had to convert my R values to U values, then conduct an average calculation, and then come up with an effective R value for that square footage. So if you were to take just pure R values and average the resistance, you know, you'd get an R50, but that's not actually how the insulation is performing. So I'm not sure if I'd be in the right place here, but I think of R value as a measure of resistance and U value as a measure of conductance. So you can increase the conductivity of something and calculate it that way. But calculating the resistance of something doesn't operate in the same way.
This is more for Ryan. Ryan, have you done any testing out there to see how effective external storm windows are?
Yes. That's part of the report that I mentioned before. I missed the.
Can you give us highlights of this?
You're
You know,
teasing us, Ryan.
Yeah, you know, and I wish. I've got about 50 projects rolling around in my head, and I don't want to misspeak about results that haven't yet been published because I don't want to say something in error. So my profound apologies for teasing and not not having the answer.
When is this report going to come out?
It'll be later this year. We have reflective insulation report that's probably be done late part of October, and then the movable window insulation report will probably be done mid to late November. And all of our reports are available online, and we typically send out announcements to our membership and other avenues when something's available.
Yeah, would reflective insulation perform better than blue foam as an exterior insulation for a window?
I suppose it would depend on what the reflective surface is combined with. So if you had a reflective surface combined with a foam type material, I imagine would perform better than just a basic blue foam.
One thing I've noticed that you could just put a strip of just aluminum foil outside of the window at the bottom of the window where you used to get frost, you no longer get frost. So just that little reflection makes all the difference.
Sure, the comments that if you put a piece of reflective material, say aluminum foil, across a window, if you've had condensation problems there in the past, it seems to alleviate those problems. And that's part of what the low E coatings, the new low E coatings on the windows tries to do, is to reflect more of that heat that would normally radiate to the outside back into the home. And one of those surfaces, typically when you have a triple pane window, you have surfaces 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And typically they'll put those low E coatings, I believe, on surface 2 and 5. So surface 2 reflects the heat from inside the house back into the home. And surface 5 actually reflects heat from going back, coming from outside back to the second pane of glass. And what that ends up doing is preventing condensation. So it actually warms up the airspace in between the glass. So what you're doing when you add that reflective surface on the outside is warming up that interior surface of the glass so that that surface doesn't hit your dew point. Kind of like when your car gets hot in the summertime. Even if it's 60 degrees out, it'll get hot on the inside because you're absorbing that radiant heat and you don't have a whole lot of convection to move that heat out of the house. Same thing happens between your panes of glass. That reflective, that radiant heat getting trapped in there is going to warm up the interior panes and prevent that condensation.
Yeah, and in terms of use in an envelope, it appears that there's, if installed properly, there's a nominal gain in R value, but you need an air gap, or else you're defeating the purpose of a reflecting radiant heat, right? So anytime it's sandwiched against something, you still have you're still prone to conductive loss. So if you install it properly, you get a nominal gain, but the gain is so small, it raises the question of whether it would be worth it to spend the extra money on it instead of additional installation.
I think one thing that's worth mentioning is that a lot of the building techniques and things that are out there that have proven very efficient and slowing down heat loss very well have been around for a long time. This technology has been around for the last 30 years. And the fact is that we know how to insulate houses. We know how to add insulation. We're very good at adding foam, adding fiberglass, and adding all those thick areas to our wall systems, to our attics and foundations. That book's pretty much been written. I think the next level is going to be how do we address this heat loss through our windows in a way that doesn't look like blue foam on my windows and look pretty ugly, but in a way that essentially is effective and fashionable at the same time, so that in the nighttime or on the north side of our houses, we essentially have a continuous amount of insulation between our wall system and our window penetrations. And if one of you can figure out a way to design a shutter system that would automatically open and close based on photo sensors that would measure the daylight outside, so they're open so you can gain your heat you can get your solar gain but close at night when you want to trap the heat in. If you can design a durable system that'll work in our climate, and keyword is durable, that looks good, you've got a great business venture there. I think that's one of those really weak points that we really haven't nailed yet, that we haven't really struck on the head. That's kind of what I would hope to see in the future.
I had a comment with regard to your picture windows. Number one, blue board can be primed and painted, so it doesn't necessarily have to look like blue board. But also, a friend of mine who lives in a small cabin with a larger amount of windows tends to cut foam and put them in the windows, but she leaves a portion right in the middle cut out so that you can see visitors, you can have the psychological value and so forth. You guys might have something to say about the effective R value of that it may not be.
I think that's a good solution. Just cutting the center of the foam out and putting foam in on the edges is fine. You're just basically cutting down the area of the foam or of the window and increasing the R value on the edge. And the center of the glass is usually the highest, the warmest spot anyway. So that's a good solution.
So Adam needs us out of here to do a movie at 8, but if there's one or two more questions, we can just take those before we go.
Mark?
Yeah, those reflective surfaces, do they interfere with heat gain from the sun as well? In terms of you're talking about the reflective surfaces to preserve the heat loss, but are they going to interfere?
You're talking about the emissivity coatings on the windows? The reflective surfaces on the windows?
For example.
Yes. So there's a lot of different types of coatings that go on windows, and some will reflect heat back into the building, some will reflect heat away from the building. You really have to look at what do you want that window to do in the side of the building that you're going to be putting it in on. If you're putting it in on the north side, you want different properties than if you're putting it in on the south side. So you're going to want to get different types of coatings, and there's whole books written on that subject. But on the NFRC, National Fenestration Rating Council, stickers that come with new windows, they talk about 4 things. They talk about the U value, which is the conductance of the window to transfer heat. They talk about the solar heat gain coefficient, which is the amount of solar that actually can come through the window. They talk about visible transmittance, and there's one other, air leakage. So the 4 numbers on the sticker, 2 of them are to do with how much heat gain you're going to get, and also the visible light transmittance. And if you're looking at buying new windows, it's worth figuring out what those numbers do, because you may want a completely different window on one side of your house than another. Karen, did you have a question?
Like we had one over here on the right-hand side.
Yes.
I've got a question about retrofits. Is it always recommended that the added insulation that you apply to a house go to the exterior? Is it just the expense of tearing out interior finished space that prevents you from, if there's a house that perhaps needs a fair amount of interior work, say rewiring, or do you think you could envision a situation where it might
There's
be good?
situations where you can do the interior just, and sometimes it may make more sense to do the interior. Typically, the exterior is chosen because it's less expensive, but there are situations where doing the interior would make perfectly good sense.
And you could escape that double vapor barrier
Yes.
problem?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. In fact, we did a house down in Homer. We took the ceiling down, added insulation to the inside. We added 4 inches of foam to the inside. So ceiling's just a horizontal wall.
Any caveats with going that route?
Not really, no.
It's messy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, be prepared for living in a construction zone. And I made a promise to myself that I would always move out of the house whenever sheetrock was being done again.
Thank you.
Well, thanks so much to our panelists. I'm sure those who can, I know Katie, you've got to head out back to Anchorage for your open house tomorrow. But whoever can, I'm sure will stick around if you guys have questions you just want to ask one-on-one. But let's give a round of applause for them.